In today's video, we'll be talking about the ultimate animal survivors. Why the ultimate? Well, for the simple reason that these 10 animals seem to defy all odds and continue to live in some form or fashion, even after apparent death. Number 10. Camels. Okay, let's get this out of the way. Camels are not immortal. But why, I hear you scream, are you showing us a photo of a headless camel that seems to be alive? Well, that's because it's not a headless camel at all, but rather a perfectly timed photo of a camel which made it look like it was headless, or it's a Photoshop job. Hard to tell nowadays. Despite being mortal though, camels are some of the hardiest animals you're ever gonna meet. They're perfectly adapted to survive in their desert habitat. They have 3 sets of eyelids and 2 rows of eyelashes to keep sand from entering their eyes, and also have the ability to completely close their nostrils during a sandstorm. However, these abilities aren't what make camels survivors. It's actually their humps. Depending on the species, camels have either 1 or 2 humps on their back. These humps in turn can store up to 80 pounds of fat, which camels can actually live off of for weeks, sometimes even months at a time. Also, living in the desert means they don't have ready access to water. So when a camel does eventually find a water source, it can drink up to 40 gallons in one go. Number 9. Flatworms. You familiar with the old wives' tale about how earthworms reproduce? It states that if you cut an earthworm in half, 2 earthworms will form from the severed halves. Of course, this has since been proven to be complete hokum. However, substitute the earthworm with a flatworm, then this old wives' tale suddenly becomes a true story. Flatworms, or planarians, are known as masters of regeneration. They can rebuild any part of their bodies after amputation. If one is cut in half, the head portion grows a tail and the tail portion grows a head. Cut it into 20 pieces and 20 new worms, each an exact copy of the first, are created. This has been exploited by Nottingham University scientists who have created a colony of more than 20,000 worms, all from one original whose bodies and organs do not appear to age. They're confident a single worm which did not divide would live forever, unless it catches an infection or another illness, of course. Number 8. The octopus. Octopuses are so tenacious that even if they're chopped to bits, they can still wriggle around, and given the right circumstances, they can even kill you. Eating chopped up or even whole live octopuses can be dangerous. No matter how disgusting you may think it is though, it actually is a real thing. There have been many documented instances of diners choking to death because one of the still wriggling tentacles get lodged in their throats, mostly because the suckers on the tentacles still work. The reason why octopus's arms maintain mobility even after being chopped off is quite fascinating. It's because their central nervous system is quite unique. Most of an octopus's nerve cells, 2/3 of them in fact, can be found not in the brain where you would expect them to be, but rather in their tentacles. And these arms can continue reacting to stimuli even after they're no longer connected to the main brain. In fact, they remain responsive even after the octopus has been long dead and the arms severed. Number 7. Snakes. Snakes, especially the venomous ones, are inherently dangerous creatures, and that's a very true fact. That's why people have the tendency of chopping their heads off when we encounter them. Might be cruel, yes, but chopping off a snake's head would certainly nullify the danger it poses, correct? Well, not quite. Yes, indeed, while chopping the thing's head off may seem to be the most feasible way to avoid getting bitten, the truth is that may not be the case. A snake's head, the vessel for its fangs and deadly poison sacs, still have the ability to bite you and deliver deadly venom even if it's no longer attached to the rest of its body. The snake has heat-sensitive pits at either side of its face, which it uses to detect threats. And let's face it, if you're close enough for your body heat to be detected, you're close enough to be considered a threat. These heat-sensitive pits are capable of detecting a threatening presence for hours after death, which means the snake may continue to defend itself zombie style. And yes, this applies even if the body is no longer attached. Number 6. Frogs. As it turns out, frogs can still perfectly function when they're brain dead, or more accurately, when their brain is completely missing. This experiment was brought about when scientists discovered reports of various headless animals continuing to move about. It's pretty impressive on its own, but let's face it, there's only so much any creature without a head could actually do. So what happens if you leave the frog's head intact but take out its brain, you may ask? Well, thanks to the approach of let's chop out its friggin' brain and see what the hell happens approach to science taken by 19th century neurologist David Ferrier, we can tell you that. A headed but brainless frog actually behaves very similar to a frog with its gray matter perfectly intact. You turn it upside down, it'll right itself. You pinch its feet, it will hop away. You put it in water, it will swim to the side and climb out. Also, perhaps most disturbing of all, it will even croak contentedly if you stroke its back. And if you think that brainless frogs can only be found in labs, think again. Look at this next clip showing headless frogs still jumping around after being skinned and beheaded. Ugh. Number 5. Chickens. Ask any farmer or rancher and they'll tell you, chickens can still run around with their heads cut off, and there's a very simple reason for this. Also, it's not because chickens are the forebringers of the zombie apocalypse. No, the reason is, believe it or not, human error. A butcher's error, to be more specific. You see, a chicken's central nervous system is poles apart from us humans. Some basic bodily functions are governed not by the brain itself, but by certain parts of the brain stem. So what the heck does this all mean exactly? Simply put, if a butcher chops a chicken's head too high, most of the time it's just the forebrain of the chicken that comes off with its head, leaving the brainstem and the cerebellum quite untouched. In fact, if the butcher also misses the jugular, not only will the chicken continue to move, it can sometimes still breathe. Of course, it will eventually starve to death, but these are special cases though. Headless Mike, a chicken owned by farmer Lloyd Olson in Fruita, Colorado, actually survived for 18 months without its head, funnily enough. Number 4. Salamanders. The salamander has always been synonymous to long life and immortality. It's even revered by people who believe in magic, believing that the amazing regenerative powers of this animal can be considered paranormal. Salamanders have the uncanny ability to regenerate any part of its body that's been chopped off. More amazingly, these regrown parts actually function the same as, or in some cases, even better than the original parts. This is mainly due in part to a special protein found in salamanders, which facilitates the replication of cells. This protein can also be found in humans, but in far smaller quantities, and they help us heal out from our wounds. So does this mean that we can soon regenerate severed limbs? Look at the Amazing Spider-Man's lizard. That about answers my question there. This might benefit humanity later on down the line, but there's still some kinks to work out. Number 3. Cockroaches. Cockroaches are infamous for their tenacity and are often cited as the most likely survivors of a nuclear war. Some even claim that they can live without their heads. Well, surprise, surprise, they can live without their heads pretty easily. In fact, they can go on living for weeks. To understand how these bugs can survive decapitation, first we must understand how we fragile humans couldn't. The answer? We bleed. We have really, really runny blood. When a man's head comes off, he bleeds a lot. Cockroaches don't have that problem though. They have an open circulatory system, which translates to little to no blood pressure. So if their head's lopped off, the wound just kinda closes naturally due to clotting. And secondly, and probably obviously, human heads hold quite a bit of important body parts for us, mainly our brain, and without it, humans can't function. Eating, drinking, and breathing are all impossible without the head. Cockroaches, on the other hand, don't need their heads to breathe, as they do this process through little holes located on their bodies called spiracles. Although a headless cockroach will die of starvation eventually, it takes weeks for them to do so. Number 2. The TURRITOPSIS jellyfish. For thousands of years, many people have searched for the key to immortality. From the first emperor of China, who firmly believed that ingesting mercury will make him live forever, spoiler it didn't, or to the numerous expeditions to find the fountain of youth, the ability to live forever is considered by many people their holy grail. The search may finally be over though, as one jellyfish was discovered that just might have the secret we've all longed for. Discovered by Christian Sommer, the TURRITOPSIS jellyfish is an animal that has a very curious life cycle, making it virtually immortal. At any point in its life, it can reverse its aging and revert back into a polyp, the earliest stage of its life cycle. Scientists still don't know how the creature does this, why it does this, and whether it does it on purpose, but one thing is clear. The old adage that states one is born then dies does not apply to all creatures on Earth. Number 1. Tardigrades. Also known by the cuddlier name of water bears, tardigrades can survive basically everything you can subject them to, and that includes freezing them. To start with, some tardigrades can survive being frozen to negative 359 degrees Fahrenheit or negative 273 degrees Celsius. But why stop there? They can also survive being boiled, nuked, exposed to extreme pressures, and launched into the vacuum of space. Yeah, you heard me right, these guys went to space without a friggin' spacesuit and survived, even the re-entry. No, NASA didn't send them there on purpose, they actually hitched a ride on the Endeavour in 2011. As we said, virtually immortal. So just what's their secret? While there have been suggestions of the extraterrestrial kind, scientists believe the tiny invertebrates survive by entering a death-like dehydrated state known as cryptobiosis. But then again, scientists have estimated that these guys can die of old age, reaching the relatively young age of 100 years. Well, young relative to the other animals on this list. But then again, for being so indestructible, this list would not be complete without the tardigrade. See you all next time.